Hello, Fred Keating here. Welcome to Fred Keating and Friends, conversations with people who make a difference.
I say that I don't make photographs, I take photographs, because I don't make the people do something, unless it's a pose or something, but I don't put anything onto them that they're not. I'm trying to find who they are within the photograph.
My mission is to bring you insightful guests, sharing how you can make a difference in your life and the lives around you by making the best use of your time and talent.
Yes, I've definitely remorse, but guilt, do not. It'll eat away at you. Don't be guilty. There's nothing to be guilty about. Remorseful, but not guilty.
Good luck with that. How many stories begin this way? I met her in a bar, at a weekly trivia competition, and over the ensuing weeks, she became my nemesis. We were neck and neck each week, alternating wins, second and third places, rotating within the top 3 teams. She was educated, had a grasp of world history, media, and music. When I asked about her, I was told she was a world-famous photographer, designer, and artist. Curious, I searched for her online and found numerous references to her work, including this description on the Vanishing Tattoo website, and I quote, "Despite being a direct descendant of Lady Godiva and being born in India, Rosamond Norbury's roots are planted firmly in British Columbia, Canada. If you're born in the Himalayas and schooled in Paris, France, how could you not grow up to be a photographer of cowboys and kink?" That's right. Rosamond Norbury has photographed Canadian icons as well as hundreds of rodeo cowboys, Harley drivers, the stars of the hit TV series Kink, and drag queen legends of Vancouver. I think of Roz as a musician. In her craft that becomes her art, there are elements of composition, practice, and performance, as in the final product on display to the public. The image or images, the finished products, are her art born of her craft. Her unfinished products are her career and her life. With some remorse, but without guilt, allow me to introduce to you Rosamond Norbury and some glimpses of her work. Here, in her own words and in her own Western-themed home, is Rosamond Norbury. Right then, off we go. I'm sitting in the charming abode of Rosamond Norbury. Thank you so much for having me over for tea. It was just what we needed to wet our whistles, so to speak. Rosamond, thanks very much for having me by. Now, before we discuss what you're doing now, I want to ask you to describe your rather exotic background, because it transcends several continents and cultures and characters. Dish, please, on the ancestors, on the roots.
Okay, well, I am very fortunate to have been born in India, which makes me sound extremely exotic. My dad, a British man, was the youngest son, so he had to go out and make his fortunes elsewhere. So he was good at chemistry, so he went to India to work in a carpet manufacturing company. My mother was a true Canadian. Previous to all of their births was my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother on my father's side was born in Esquimalt. She was the son of a sea captain, and so she was born on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. My grandfather had been out in Fort Steele. He was a rancher out in Fort Steele for quite a long time, but then his brother became ill and he went back to England to take care of the estate. And so on my grandmother's tour of Europe, she met my grandfather. He proposed to her in the conservatory and she accepted. So she lived in England practically all of her life. So we always said she was more British than the British, but she was a little bit of a renegade. So my grandparents had roots in Canada. But then my dad, being the youngest son, went out to India to work in the carpet manufacturing company. When he was on leave, after the war and on leave. And India, you go on leave, you take a year off, 6 months off. He went to Vancouver to find out where his mother had come from, British Columbia, all that. And that's where he met my mother. He was walking down Howe Street, and he was an amateur photographer. So he was walking down Howe Street, and he looked over and saw this gorgeous woman. And he went to come back and take another look, and she'd disappeared. Well, it turns out my mother was a window dresser at Suzette's ladies' clothing store. And so she stood out on the street to look at her window dressing and then gone back in the store. So my poor dad was mystified as to where this lovely woman had come from. He had tried to submit some photos to National Geographic. And his friend, Wiley Brackett, who, a great name, Wiley Brackett, who never paid him back the money that my dad loaned him, he suggested finding some models for him to shoot in Stanley Park. And lo and behold, one of those models was that gorgeous woman that he'd seen on the street, my mother. So I think she was probably dating someone at the same time, but they went on at the cave, mutual dates. And for, I would say, over a period of maybe 2 months, they knew each other. Then he had to go back to India and get back to work. And so as he was leaving the day before, or the night, they went out again, probably to the cave. And he handed her a little, it was wrapped in a laundry bill or something. It was a brooch. And so the next day, well, my mother said she was sick, but I think she was probably hungover, I don't know. Got her mother to take it to check it out at the jewelry or have it cleaned. And the jeweler said, "Have you had this thing insured?" So I think she realized she was on to a good thing. When my dad got back to India, he sent her a letter and said, "Would you consider coming out to India to marry me?" And she said, "As long as you provide me with a return ticket, yes, I'll do it." So she took the boat out to India. They got married in Bombay and were happily married for the rest of their lives.
I'll be darned. And then those Vancouver roots eventually brought them back to Western Canada?
So I was born in Missouri. I was born in June. So we actually lived near a place called Allahabad, near Varanasi, which is a carpet manufacturing town. But in the summertime, everyone goes up to the hills. So I was born in Missouri, as was my older sister, Judy. So back in the 50s, there was a polio epidemic. And so my sister got polio in the 50s. So we all had to come back to Canada. My mom thought and my dad thought it was better to have the support of her parents. So it was the longest Mercy flight that they'd ever made in a Comet, which used to explode, but this one didn't explode. And so we all came back to Vancouver. My poor dad had to sell like carpets door to door. I said to him once, "Why didn't you just leave?" He said, "I loved you," which I think is sweet. So he worked, oh my goodness, at Woodward's. He loved working in the secondhand store at Woodward's. And then he always wanted to be a doctor, although he never had any of the training. So he became a first aid attendant and worked on the ships, on the freighters that came in. So the world kind of visited him in the rest of his life. So that's the basic story. My sister survived very well, I want you to know. She's in a wheelchair, but she's had 2 children by natural childbirth. She's a true hippie. She was at Altamont. I can tell all these stories now. And had her 2 children, and she still lives. I'm going to her 70th birthday party in Courtenay in 2 weeks.
I'll be darned. Well, now, just to touch for a moment on your own various artistic achievements. Tell me about your career arc in terms of the various art forms, and there are a number of them that you've been involved in, that you've expressed your creativity and your passion for color, texture, etc. There's a family generic named the graphic arts. What are the graphic arts, and which of them do you practice, and why?
Okay, well, the graphic arts, back in the 70s, I went to the Vancouver School of Art, when it was the Vancouver School of Art, on right kitty corner from the bus depot on Cambie Street, downtown Vancouver. And I went up to 3rd year there. And about 3rd year, I realized that there's no future. There's no money to be made in the arts. And way back when, the vocational school was also in the building, same building as the art school. And they had an open house at the VVI, and I went downstairs to the graphic arts, the printing program down there. And now at that time, number one, it was a 2-year program, but it was the first year that they allowed women to take that course. And I was in that course.
What year was that, and how old were you?
Okay, that would have been 1974. I think I was probably about 24, something like that. Yeah. And so I took the 2-year course, and I loved it. I mean, you learn how to do typesetting, running a press. I learned to run the platen letterpress. They called me the platen princess because it was like driving a sports car. I just loved working the press. And you just learned all about the graphic arts. So when I graduated, I got a job at Bemwell Atkins in their art department. So I worked at Bemwell Atkins for a number of years and learned just to apply my trade as I make business cards and brochures and posters. Just learned how to do proper design.
So I'm not familiar with Bemwell Atkins. What are they?
I don't think they're around anymore, but they were a very well-esteemed Vancouver printing company. They had printing presses, but they also had an in-house art department. The art director quit, and I thought I should have got the job and didn't, and so I quit and freelanced for quite a while. And then I worked for another graphics company called Kent Allen Design, and I think there was a slowdown. They had to lay me off. And ever after that, I freelanced. That was the last job I ever really had where I got a regular paycheck. So after that, I just I would do paste up in my apartment. I lived on Hemlock Street then, and just do paste up and a little bit of design from my apartment.
So it wasn't a matter of just printing other people's work. When did working for clients and printing out whatever designs they had thought they wanted or had commissioned you to do, when did you start to create or generate your own designs?
Well, I'm also a printmaker. When I was I must have been about 15 or 16, I took another class at the Vancouver School of Art. I learned etching and lithography and lino cuts, but all of the fine art printmaking. And that's what I really loved, doing that as an art project as opposed to a money-making project. You don't make money selling your prints. I mean, you make money working for other people, but selling artwork is not really a way to fortune. Maybe a little bit of fame, but not fortune. So that's how I subsidized my art making, was by doing my paste up. But also at that time, Granville Island had just opened. This is back in, I'd say the late 70s. And down on Granville Island, there was a place called Malaspina Printmakers. It was started by people from the art school who realized that when you're a printmaker, you need a printing press, which costs thousands of dollars. And so they developed a co-op to share a press and share the facilities. So it started off on Pender Street, and then it finally, when Granville Island opened, they had a permanent residence on Granville Island.
And Granville Island, for those who are unfamiliar with Vancouver, is that one-time industrial area, almost a sandbar, that had been repurposed around a huge public market, as well as these small craft-oriented shops and boutiques where you can find things literally that you couldn't find anywhere else.
That's right. And it was about 5 blocks from where I lived. So, I mean, it was so convenient. I could just walk down there because parking has always been a challenge down there. So I just walk down there, spend the day, and do etchings and lithographs and not really silk screens, not too much silk screening, but mainly etchings and lithographs.
So sort of a time-sharing situation, get time, book time on the various presses or arenas within the place where you'd want to work. And I guess people have done that. Artists have done that from time immemorial. If you cannot afford the technology that is at current market prices, you find colleagues who have the same need, divvy up the cost or the space, and get to create.
And it's a wonderful co-op. I mean, everyone, right now, it's so high-tech. They have state-of-the-art printmaking on computers and everything, but still they have the arcane presses and all of the things that have been since Rembrandt's time, like really old school stuff that it really has the hand of the artist in it. I really like that about it.
But it's also your eye that's brought you a great deal of work and notoriety, your photographic skills. And how did you get led into, get a little brownie box camera at Christmas kind of path there?
Well, that was. We had always at Christmas, we had our gift from Toronto, which were friends of my parents in India that would always send a really wonderful present. And one year I got a brownie camera. And my dad, being the photographer, was like, "Ooh, okay." And so he really helped me in the darkroom. So I learned from him a lot about photography. And then he gave me some of his cameras. And so I've only taken 2 classes in photography. Everything else is just self-taught. And so just through the years, I would always have the camera. So when I was at Malaspina, they had a darkroom there. So I would use their darkroom and I would shoot their archives. So I always kept my hand in on the photography end.
So no running to the drugstore and waiting 2 weeks for the prints. You were literally developing not only your skills, but your own budding collection of work.
Well, that's the beauty of the darkroom. No one can come in. I mean, it's a really sacred territory and it's for real. I mean, you can't open that door and let the light out or in. And just learning from making dreadful mistakes. I mean, that's how you learn the best, is to say, I'll never do that again. And then I'm going to segue to, I'd say pre-Expo. A very dear friend, Brad Goff. He was a fashion stylist. He and his partner opened a store called Powwow on Cordova Street. And they wanted to kind of ride along on the coattails of Expo and feature Canadian designers.
And Expo being Expo 86, the 1986 World's Fair that was held in Vancouver, British Columbia, not only to host the world, but also to celebrate the city of Vancouver's centennial year. And that was a great example of a cultural explosion and celebration all in one. And so your friend and his partner set this up?
They set up the store. It had a big teepee in it. It was an old store on Cordova, like almost 2 stories, and there was a mezzanine at the back, and they rented the mezzanine area to me. So I did my paste up there and used it as a little photo studio. And so Brad would take over. There was Morning Star, all different stores on that block, and they would advertise as a block in little magazines. And so he said, "Come on, Roz, you're the photographer now." So I would take all the pictures for the stores and for the block. And so with that, I developed, they're called tear sheets. It's how people take you seriously, is that you don't just show your pictures, you show that your picture has been published. So that gives you extra cred. So I amassed a portfolio from that. And so I took that portfolio to Vancouver Magazine, Western Living, and they would hire me to shoot up-and-coming people along. So again, I amassed another, even more. You just build upon that.
That's very interesting to me when I think of the people I know in the film and media arts trying to get their work seen by those who might engage their services. Did you have a particular approach? Did you cold call these people either over the phone or walk into their offices, or did you always walk in on somebody else's reference who had helped you get some sort of an appointment? How did that work?
Well, back then Vancouver was a smaller city, so everybody really knew everybody else. And so Brad just said to me, "Go and see Rick Staling. He's the art director. Go and show him." So that's all you would do. You just phone them up and say, "Hey, can I make an appointment? Show your portfolio." And say, "Oh, yeah." He was more impressed that I had a 2.25 camera rather than 35 millimeter, I think, rather than my actual quality of my photos. But I got better and better as I did it. And then it was again in the 80s. Country music was huge back then, and I would listen to all the country music on the radio. And there was an announcement that said, "It's the Cloverdale Rodeo in May." I wasn't doing anything for the weekend. And so I phoned my friend Betty Skakem, who was the art director at Where Vancouver magazine. I said, "Can you get me a press pass?" She said, "Sure." And so I arrived at the Cloverdale Rodeo with my press pass. And, back then now there's security and they won't let you go anywhere there. You just wandered in and you could just shoot away. So that whole rodeo, that weekend, I went back for the 3 days. I don't think I shot any of the buck and broncos or the bulls or anything. I just shot all the cowboys behind the scenes. So I got some I still use the pictures to this day. They were that very first week. They were great pictures that I shot. And I took them into Rick Staling, and he said, "Roz, I wish I'd known you were doing." He said, "I wanted pictures like that. The guy I sent, all he did was shoot the action." And so he bought a whole bunch of my shots to put in the article. And so that just kind of built from there. So after that, I had a show at I think Contemporary Art Gallery. I can't remember. Had a call for submissions, so I put my rodeo things in, and I had my first show. And again, through Malaspina, they were doing an art exchange in Lima, Peru. And it costs a lot. I sent some stuff down in a group show, and they invited me back for a solo show. But it costs a lot of money to send artwork down to Peru. And so for some reason, I don't know how it happened, I got an interview with the North Shore News, hoping that, because I'm an old West Van girl, I was hoping that maybe someone would come up with some money for me or something. Well, publisher White Cap Books in North Vancouver saw the article. They'd been to a book fair and said, "Rodeo is really big right now. We could do a book on that." So they phoned me up and said, "If you've got the right images, then we'd be interested in publishing a book." So, it was another 4 or 5 years of traveling the rodeo circuit before I really did the book. Barbara says I have horseshoes up my bum because I just fall into lucky situations. I don't really think that I go after it as much as it comes my way.
And so, again, asking on behalf of individuals who are a few years behind you and looking for the kinds of information that you're sharing, would they already, at least verbally committing to a book, but wanting more images, was there any kind of advance involved, or was this all you doing spec work for 4 or 5 years, turning things in, having it accepted or rejected, and trying again? Tell us about that process.
It's hell. And I wrote the text for it too. I think I got the advance when they saw that everything was in the right order, that they liked it. So yeah, I just did the whole rodeo thing on my own coin. In the book, I thank my mom and dad because I would set out. I went as far as Smithers, up to Prince George. Every weekend I just set out and go out, find out where the rodeos were, and head out for the rodeos. Now, luckily, again, Gastown Business Improvement Society helped me out because they hired me to shoot photos of Gastown, and so they paid very, very well. So that really was the money I earned to finance a lot of the rodeo book.
Did you drop down to the States at all to get the Western American take on rodeo?
I was in Ellensburg. My final rodeo, after the book was almost ready to go, Barbara and I went down to Arizona and Four Corners, and I went to a rodeo in Shiprock. It was a Navajo rodeo in Shiprock, and I thought, I'm going to get some really interesting, unique pictures. Well, it was what I found gratifying. A rodeo is a rodeo is a rodeo. There was nothing different. The only thing different is it was announced in Navajo. But other than that, visually, it was a rodeo. So, that was still, now you go to a rodeo, it's still a rodeo.
That's a heck of a book to start to build a longer-term career on, I would think. And the other one that comes to mind, of course, is your entree into the drag scene in Vancouver, and the inroads is the wrong word, but the affinity you found and felt, gave and was returned. Tell us how that all came about, that entire community.
Well, my rodeo book, Behind the Chutes, was a Canadian bestseller. I think it went through a couple of printings. And so I was like the goose that was laying the golden egg for my for Whitecap Books. And so the publisher took me out to lunch and said, "What are you doing now?" Well, I'd been going to the Heritage Hotel, seeing the drag shows. I've always loved drag my whole life. I've just loved drag queens. So just out of the blue, I said, "Oh, drag." I'm thinking, because I had taken a few shots of drag queens. And so it was just an off-the-cuff remark. So about 4 months later, Colleen phoned me up and she said, "Yeah, the book's a go." What? So Guy to Goddess came. Bill Richardson wrote the text. He did a wonderful job of writing the text. And so, say for the next 2+ years, I became a night owl. I just followed the drag queens. Still now they're friends of mine, really deep, deep. Carlotta is one of my dearest friends, who is, I would say, Vancouver's #1 drag queen. And I love a drag show. I really do enjoy. There's just something magical about someone that's larger than life up there with big hair and lip syncing to a song. It's just, you either have it or you don't as far as drag goes. You either don't get it at all and you don't really care, or you watch it and you go, it strikes a chord. And with me, it totally strikes a chord.
I've seen the book and I've been through it, and you have this knack for capturing various aspects of individuals, various private or public moments that open, I think, a window into those particular individuals or the culture or activity that they represent. How do you do that?
Well, it's not even that. I mean, I love the people, but I think the most important thing is I know my equipment. Like, I know my camera, I know what it's going to do. And so it's like an extension of me. So I would make an appointment with my drag queen and they would answer the door as a guy, sweat socks and, jeans and stuff. And then I would just follow them as they got made up. So when you're comfortable and having a conversation, and I was always interested that with drag queens, you can't ask an embarrassing question. I mean, because there's a huge amount of comedy involved and they're not transgender, then you have to be a little careful because and I was totally unaware of, I knew a few transgender people, but it was back then you didn't really know a lot about transgender people. But drag is different from that. I think there's different levels of gender, and drag queen is the frothy fun on the top that you can't ask an inappropriate question. It's just very comfortable for me. And so I always felt at ease. And so you just take great pictures if you're all in each other's company and you're just camping it up and laughing. And it was like things were unfolding in front of me that were amusing and worth taking pictures of.
With all due respect for your equipment and your mastery of that equipment, and I've said this to other artists in interviews, that the technical proficiency that you have is almost a given, or you would not have generated as much work as you have. But the reason why I'm always asking you about how you do these, how you approach people that may or may not be able to work with you for a number of reasons in a number of ways, is because I'm always fascinated by the kind of personal toolkit in terms of their own characteristics that artists carry around with them that either ease potential conflict or friction or tension, or create it in some cases. And so the idea that you talk about the froth and that was almost the title of the book.
Well, no, the title of the movie was.
The title of the movie, okay. But you have this approach that is pure Roz, and so I'm digging to see what it is, what you picked up. Which is why I ask about your parents first and where you came from and how you learned and how old you were when you were doing some of these things, because I'm fascinated by the personal toolkits that the incredible human beings that I can, creative, artistic types are, and how their collection of characteristics bleeds into their work, or their work exhibits that, and so do their relationships.
Well, I I just think, again, it comes back to my parents. My mother was a consummate artist. Like, she drew beautifully. She did weaving and spinning. And so I think I was just gifted with her talent, like intrinsically. So I think I have her eye. So an eye is something you can't learn. You just have to have it. I just have it. And so with that eye, I can just see things in the viewfinder and know that if I move a little way or a little way there, it just looks better. And that's just from doing it and seeing it through the viewfinder. I love looking at life through the viewfinder. I had a great conversation. I also do stills on documentaries. And so I did all the stills on a show called Kink that was on Paperny Films. And I was talking to the cinematographer, and we both agreed that we can really look at things that might be really disturbing to look at or very hard to look at because we're a little bit removed. We're looking at them through a plane of glass. We're not really staring at it right there. We're just one step removed. And so sometimes that gives you license to get in a little closer because you don't really feel you're invading because there's a little space between the subject and yourself, but it does invite you to dive in there even more.
Tell us about the book that came out of your experience in the drag society.
Well, the book's called Guide to Goddess, and it really did turn me into a night owl, which I'm not naturally. But that was, I'll tell you the most difficult thing. I didn't have my final contract signed. Now, I'm going to show you a cruel side of drag queens. This is a drag queen I'm not very fond of, and I'll tell you why. She was going to host the launch party. I still hadn't signed the contract, and the book hadn't been printed. And she had lunch with my publisher, and he said, "See you later." And she said, "I don't know that I will." And what? She said, "I haven't signed a model release," which she hadn't. I was very careful about getting releases signed by everyone, but I avoided that one. Previous to that, I'd been down in Spokane for a drag show and had no model releases signed there. And so my publisher hauled me and she said, "I want to know every single one of these people that doesn't have a model release." I spent 2.5 days without sleep phoning down to the States saying, when you've got Maybelline Fabulash, like they're not in the phone book. You have to phone around and find everyone I phoned said, "I'd love to be in the book. It'd be great. Meanwhile, I'm phoning the other drag queen trying to say, "Please get this model release signed." Finally, about 5:30 in the morning, I phone. "Hello?" I said, apparently there's been a confusion here, and unless I get you to sign this release, there won't be a book. She said, "I was only joking." Well, my mother was furious. I still find it very hard to be nice to this particular person. I won't mention names, but it's not Carlotta.
I assumed not. I saw some incredible work that you did in the program for one of K.D. Lang's country tours. K.D. Lang, the country alt-rock icon from Canada, actually from Consort, Alberta, Canada. Tell me about how that relationship came about and how you went on the road with her with your lenses and the whole 9 yards, and tell us how long that lasted. We've got some great pictures because, again, I thought you did such great character work on catching K.D. in very public and very private moments. Tell us how that relationship started.
Katie and I have been friends ever since she was at the Railway Club where she first got her start. Janet Forsyth, Spirit of the West manager, said, "You'll like this girl. She's fun." So I went to see her and I was like, "Man, that's Elvis in a dress." And so back then I was listening to country music all the time. So I just invited her over for dinner and we just got on like a house on fire. So we just remained friends just ever since from that time. We would go walking in Stanley Park with her dog, hang out together. Then when her all-you-can-eat tour was happening, she said, come on down, we're rehearsing at the PNE, and maybe take some pictures of the new band and, bring your camera, let's have some fun. So I took a bunch of pictures, and then she did a first performance in Victoria. So I took the ferry over to Victoria with those photos. And in the dressing room, she looked and she said, how would you like to join me on the tour that I'm on? And I was like, what would I? So it was just amazing. I was on the band bus. I got to hang out. I got to visit every wonderful city in the United States. I got to fly on the Warner's private jet between New York and Hamilton for the Juno Awards, where I got to take a picture of Anne Murray. It was like a gift. It was really one of the most wonderful gifts ever. And because we're good friends, there was never any weirdness, because I could just be there and just shoot her as a friend, not as someone that I didn't really know. It was more just a casual thing that I was doing.
Well, obviously you'd, over a period of time, had established the kind of trust that every artist would like to have, an authentic relationship with people that they like and love and respect, but that doesn't often happen. It happens less and less. Sometimes the higher that particular artist rises in social media and the media itself. So that sounds like a very interesting two-way street. How long were you on the road?
I was on the road, let me see now. Well, we flew into, was it Philadelphia? It was the coldest winter ever, and the heat on the bus broke down. I thought, this isn't going to be easy. But I was on the road with her about 3 or 4 months, I guess, crossing the United States. And then I went back. She did another little tour, and then there was a final tour where we got to go to Nashville, which it was like a dream come true. We were actually at the real Ryman Auditorium. Like, I got to stand on the stage where Patsy Cline had stood. And then Owen Bradley was still alive there. He was there. Owen Bradley produced Shadowland. He produced Patsy Cline. I mean, I got to meet him and take pictures, and it was really like a dream come true.
But have I not heard you say occasionally that some of the most challenging assignments you've had, and I don't mean assignment in the paid way, but some of the most difficult shots you've had to take are of friends? Why is that?
I find it's the most difficult thing to do is take a definitive picture of someone you really know, because, I mean, you know so many aspects of them. And so I find it easier to take a shot of someone that I've just met and just get a little click of, that one little spark. But someone that you're always looking to find the narrative or find something about them that is telling in the photograph, and that doesn't always come up. So it's like you're just digging for something, some little spark, and you don't know. I know when I've got it, but I don't even know how I get there. You just can dance around a little bit, and it comes, and it reveals itself.
So is that what you mean then by a definitive photograph, a definitive image of someone?
Yeah, I think if you look at a photograph and it tells you who they are, what they're about, I would say that's definitive. I say that I don't make photographs, I take photographs, because I don't make the people do something, unless it's a pose or something, but I don't put anything onto them that they're not. I'm trying to find who they are within the photograph.
Tell me about women in beards, bearded women, bearded ladies.
Okay, this is my latter persona. I don't know if you know, I perform as a drag queen. There's a thing called turnabout, where drag queens will perform as a guy, and if the guy will try and do drag. Well, I kind of wander around in my boots and jeans, so I did Barbra Streisand in a turnabout and got quite a few tips. In fact, Katie Lang tipped me.
Sorry to interrupt. So tips as in, hey, good job, here's money, as opposed to tips on you should have held your face in the light a bit more?
Tipping is a way of showing a drag queen that you appreciate them. Since we don't have fold-in money anymore, it's getting harder and harder to tip. But back then, $2 was a very nice folding tip, $1 even. Now it's $5 bills. But yeah, there's an art to tipping, and you have to know, and then the drag queen, sometimes if she doesn't like you, will wait and make you stand there while they do a number. And there's real things that go on within the art of tipping. But anyway, that's tipping. So performing as Rose Bush, I love doing that. And then, I don't know, I think it was, everything happens at Halloween. There's many a man that's put on a dress at Halloween and never looked back. Well, I put a beard on at Halloween. And I was thinking, what should my name be? And I just thought the worst name the most naughty name was Rod Bush. So that is my male persona. And, I've been, again, very lucky to know Diane Home, who has a shop called Wig Camp. She makes wigs and beards and everything for the movie industry. And so she actually made me sideburns, mustache, goatee. So I have my very own sideburns, so I can slap on Rod Bush whenever I want to. But the thing about Rod Bush, Diane and Barbara, they'll put mustaches and beards on, and they have their persona, but they are assholes. They think that men, they bring out the worst male that they can dredge up. They're ready to punch someone out and swear and spit. Whereas I'm a very gentle male. I think I take after my dad. So I just like to put the beard and I don't wear anything different. I don't wear a bra, but other than that, I just wear my jeans, my boots, and my beard. And I say that any man past the age of 40 is wallpaper. No one notices them. They just are not noticed. And I'm a voyeur, that's why I'm a photographer.
I'm over here, by the way. I'm over here.
Oh, Fred, hello. I didn't notice you. Oh, sorry. So I like to watch. I will go out, like Halloween and stuff, I'll go out with other people, but I like to travel alone, and I'll put the beard and the mustache on, and then I'll just watch. And because even as a woman in any situation, you're still noticed. But if you're a guy, you are invisible. And so I can just watch whatever's going on. It's just a wonderful little bird's eye view of life that I enjoy. I don't want to be a man. I think to be a man is a huge responsibility. I think it really is. Being a woman it's easy. Things kind of come to you. But a man has to fight, has to be a man. And it's a challenge. I don't mind it for, a day, a few hours, but I wouldn't want to be one.
That's interesting you say that, because again, as a student of literature, I learned a lot about the Western vision of a man, of a heroic male character in literature, and it often had to do with a certain stoicism, a certain solitary approach, always on the move, even when never staying in one place too long. And when you describe Rod, and I've seen in the movie, the documentary that they did on you, that seems the essence of a male about that age. Quiet, polite, not overly gregarious, not overly, hey, I want to be everybody's friend, but will answer a question straight back if it's asked with some level of respect and honesty and integrity. But I hadn't thought of it from that side, from your side of the lens, meaning your own two eyes, watching the world pass you by. I'm of a certain age myself these days. And yes, invisible is the first thing that comes to my mind, and I've noticed it for the last maybe 5 to 10 years. Invisible in malls, in churches, with same sex, different sex, doesn't matter. You get to a certain age as a male, I don't know about it as a female, and you're invisible. There's no reason other than a sidelong glance to make sure you're not going to do something. There's no reason to interact or acknowledge this older person. It's still taking some getting used to.
Well, I just do it a couple of times a year, but yeah, I just find also watching people's reaction to me, thinking I'm a male. Like men will look at you, like check you out, not aggressively, but they just want to know what's coming, differently than they would look at me if I were a woman. And women will kind of glance, but not. This is walking along the street, you're coming along. But it's just interesting to see the reaction as opposed to me walking down the street as a woman. It's a whole different dynamic.
And does Rod walk differently? Rod has what you might characterize as a male walk or stride.
A swagger, a little bit of just a little bit more of a stride. Yeah, I walk a little bit more butch.
Yeah, like don't try me, man. I might look a certain age, but you don't know what I know.
That's right. Yeah. But I just the other day, Diane let me borrow her full red beard. And so Barbara and I went to, it was a beard competition at the Lamplighter that we attended. Barbara had the mustache on. I had the full beard. We went for dinner at La Bodega. And we just looked like two short men, basically. And the waitress was cool, totally cool. She realized that I was a woman. Well, we were both women, but she was just nonplussed. She thought it was amusing, but wasn't shocked in any way. Served us. We ate our meal. But then later, I just walked around Gastown, just watching and just seeing how people didn't look at me, really, just how I was unnoticed.
Yes, welcome to my world. Now you've spread that a little bit. You talk about Barb, and I want to talk about Barb in a few minutes, but and the documentary that Sharon McGowan, UBC film program head, and one, I think, of the early founders of Women in Film and Television Vancouver, arguably one of the most active groups in the world. She did a documentary on you. Tell me how that came about, and then tell me about the exhibit that you put on, the photos of women, again, of a variety of ages and colors and creeds, that became quite a spectacular experience, not only for I'll call them models, but the real people that you used, but also for their extended families and the public tell me the story of the documentary and then the exhibit.
Okay. Well, Sharon had just got a new camera, and she phoned me up and she said, I need to practice on this camera and I need someone that I'm comfortable with. So what are you doing lately? And she wanted to make, about a 2-minute little clip. And so I told her that I'd been doing Rod Bush and wearing my beard. She said, well, can I just follow you along and shoot some of it? So for about 2 years, she even came to my house when I was moving. It was fun. Wired me for sound and took shots. So she followed me when if I said, Halloween, I'm going to put a beard on. So she'd follow along and do various follow-ups on me as Rod Bush and Rosamond, both things. And then I get invited to participate in shows, and it was at the Roundhouse. During Pride, they have an art exhibition. And so I was invited to show there, and it was called Random Acts of Queerness. And so I thought, okay, I'll try and build something from this. And so Diane, my beard maker, and I got together, and we just got about 7 or 8 people that most of them I didn't know. We arranged for them to come by. I'd take pictures of them as women. And then we'd put the beard, and Diane would style them as men. And then we'd shoot them as men. And we'd hold off on the reveal. And when they saw themselves in the mirror, it was just amazing. So a lot of that is in the film. And it was just really interesting to see how, I know how I feel when I put the beard on, but to watch the other women, to watch their reactions, all different different reactions, but really quite rewarding and quite just illuminating, I think.
Based on what, do you reckon? By that I mean, yes, I saw the film and loved it, and saw the variety of reactions that these young women had when you pulled that mirror around and showed them what they looked like. Can you describe one or two of them that pop out at you? And then let's talk about when they saw themselves or they came to the reception with boyfriends, husbands, and family members.
Well, one woman, my favorite actually, she'd lost a son when he was very childbirth, probably. I don't think, not very old. And so for her, it was like what her son might have looked like, which just, it was just like very emotional. That was really touching, that one. Just because they're straight women. If you're in a gay club, you kind of know, you're more attuned to different gender fluidity. But these are straight women just seeing what it's like to be a guy just for a moment and look like a guy. And the reactions, it's that, because there's no fooling. You look at yourself that moment and you go, oh, because it's a whole different person that's looking at you. You could be like your father or an uncle or just someone that you always thought you could have been, maybe. It was, and the show was great. People, it was funny to see husbands and boyfriends and people that didn't really, they'd look at the picture and then realize, oh my God, that's you. Not even knowing that it was actually a woman underneath it all. Yeah.
That's amazing. When I was at university, I worked in the girls' dorm in the kitchens, and they had a reverse day once where the guys were supposed to dress as girls and the girl employees were dressed as guys. And so I had this little green outfit on. I know. Yes. I suppose if I'd found the picture, I'd have brought it along. But at any rate, I just looked like a sad, ugly version of my sister, who's a beautiful girl. And again, university in those days, I had hair of some length. It looked strange, but I can identify with that kind of first look. It was like, really? Is that? Oh, I would never. My God, it's my sister Joanne. Anyway, it's a compelling film. I hope a lot of people have seen it. Tell me about some of your mentors you have in passing throughout our conversation. And tell me a little bit more about Barb, because you and Barb have been friends together and separately for decades, yes?
Oh my God, almost 40 years. Man, I can't think. It's 30 plus years. I love Barbara's sense of humor. She always makes me laugh, and she never bores me. So I have a very low tolerance for boredom. So it's very nice. We've lived together off and on. When I lived on Hemlock Street, we lived together for a while, and then we had a fight about laundry. So she moved out on her own. That was our only fight. We bicker, but we don't really fight. It's nice having her around. We just understand each other. I can't even explain our relationship. I think many of our friends aspire to our relationship because it's comfortable, it's honest. Our families are intermingled. I consider Barbara's sister as one of my sisters. And it's, that's all I can really say about it. It's just having someone that knows who you are, that accepts you, I could say anything to Barbara if I've done close to murder, and she would say, well, let's talk about it. She wouldn't judge me on things. It's nice having someone that just understands you.
Relationships like that are few and far between. It's to be envied. I have written here on a big card, fun, because that seems to be a key word, a key theme in your photography and your approach to your work and your approach to your life. And can you tell me where this strange affinity for fun came from? I'm right here. I'm not invisible. I'm asking this question. Let's make it fun.
Well, it's, do you know Eloise? Well, getting bored is not allowed. That's one of her mantras. So you got to have fun not to get bored. So, I mean, life's too short. Who wants to be dreary? I mean, I'm perfectly capable of being serious, but do you know about my religion?
I read about that somewhere, and it's short and simple, like you. It's tell me about the basic tenets of religion according to Roz.
Yes, the religion of Roz, there are 3 tenets to it. The first is, I can't remember the first, which is, I have to start again.
I can. Don't feel guilty. It's tattooed right on your arm there, for heaven's sake.
Okay. The first tenet of the religion of Roz is don't feel guilty, which I don't feel guilty. That's like not. Second one, send me $20. And then I can never remember the third one. I know it's probably very smart and witty, but I don't know what the third one is.
Yeah. You had me at don't feel guilty. You lost me at send me $20, and now I'm just confused, but I get it. I get it. Time, life, it's too short.
Yeah, don't feel guilty. My mother actually said to me, she said, you do not feel guilty. And she said it in admiration, but she even knew back then that I don't feel remorse. Yes, I've definitely remorse, but guilt, do not. It's just, it'll eat away at you. Don't be guilty. There's nothing to be guilty about. Remorseful, but not guilty.
It's a very interesting distinction. Remorseful, but not guilty. I think I've been guilty about both, and I'm remorseful about it now. But
Send me $20.
Right. It's in the mail, I promise you. It's been a particular privilege to chat with you today and share some of the images, not only the words, but the images that you've created for other people to appreciate. And by golly, by all accounts, they do. So, Rosamond Norbury, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred Keating. I'll see you at Trivia on Tuesday.
Okay. Well, thank you, listeners, for spending some time with us. Roz's book of rodeo images, Behind the Chutes, and that's chutes spelled Chuttes, as in the chutes that hold the Brahma bulls and broncos at the rodeo, not shoots as in photo shoots. It's brilliant work, iconic cultural images. Roz is one of a kind. All my pals are. I want to give a shout out to Chris McIntosh of Vancouver's Postal Audio for pulling together the sound and ironing out the wrinkles and missteps and shortening some of my long-winded questions and dramatic pauses without purpose. And of course, Simon Morgan in the Edmonton office of Lindisfarne Productions, Inc. for matching the images to the audio in this project. Thanks to Rosemary Jack and Katie Keating for their infinite patience and support on these projects. And to you, dear listeners, for taking the time to meet and hear another unique individual I call friend. This podcast was recorded at Roz's residence on Wednesday, July 10th, 2019. This is Fred Keating saying goodbye for now, and may all your pain be champagne.